Here's an accurate description of me playing the robot level in Spider-Man 2002, the game.
Misery, 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 that's what you've chosen. I offered you friendship, and you spat in my face.
Last time we looked at something Spider-Man related, we looked at the two PlayStation 1 games. Spider-Man 2000 was a blast from the past.
Oh, sorry lady, didn't see it there.
And Enter Electro was alright, I guess, but it felt more like Spider-Man 1.5 than a full sequel, but understandable given the shorter development time they were given.
It's cozy, I guess.
Enter Electro sold decently, but not as well as the first game though, and it did not receive the same amount of positive feedback as the first game did.
No.
So seeing as everyone enjoyed those videos, like a lot of you, thank you by the way, that means a lot.
I love all of you.
Let's jump to the next generation of consoles and the PlayStation 2, my favorite video game console of all time.
You're as beautiful as the day I lost you.
Instead of a sequel to those games, we're looking at a movie tie-in game. Yeah, I know, movie tie-ins, ooh, red flag right off the bat. A movie tie-in to Spider-Man 2002. The movie it was based on was huge at the time. I don't say that lightly. It was hugely impactful on films and the superhero genre in general. I love the first two Spider-Man films. Cheesy as fuck? Yes, of course. But god damn, I love these films. We don't talk about the third one though. I'm curious, would you guys like me to talk about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films at some point? I have a lot to say about them for sure, and it would make some fun videos.
Give it to me! Give it to me! Give it to me! Give it to me! Just give it!
Because this is the PlayStation 2 era of video games, where every show, film, toy got a bloody video game. Don't believe me? Top Trumps got a video game.
What?
Spider-Man 2 and 2 got a video game adaptation. I will be looking for the most part at the PlayStation 2 version, with a little bit of the Xbox version as well, as the Xbox version has an exclusive boss. We will get back to that later.
It's my curse! Subtlety!
Taking over development duty this time is Treyarch, a name you might recognize from being forced to make Call of Duty until the end of time and the universe itself.
Let go of us, please!
I'm really looking forward to this. I haven't played this game in a very long time, so let's find out how it is. Before we start, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for all new content. So how does this movie video game adaptation stack against the last few Spider-Man games? And does it reach the level of success that they did? Well, let's grab our web shooters and find out.
Go Web, go!
Before I start, something really annoyed me right off the bat. It's a small nitpick, but why is this game just called Spider-Man? No subtitle, nothing, just Spider-Man. Because now we just have two games called Spider-Man. Like with the recent games where they've called it Marvel Spider-Man to give it some uniqueness. Just call it Spider-Man the game or something. Because now whenever you have to say, oh, I was just playing Spider-Man, it's like, oh, which one? Spider-Man PlayStation 1, Spider-Man on PS4, Spider-Man 2 which one?
Pettiness.
Being as this is a movie tie-in game, it adapts the film's movie events by changing them a little bit, but also adding some more content to increase the game's runtime. With that being said, let's start with the story. We start out with Spidey in a really beautiful looking PlayStation 2 cutscene. He talks about how Aunt May and Uncle Ben raised him as their own, and brings up how they never really had much money. So now that he's gained his new spider powers, he decides to use those powers to enter a wrestling match and earn some more money for them.
You're going nowhere. I got you for 3 minutes. 3 minutes of playtime.
Oddly, they don't go over how Peter got his powers. No spider bite besides the opening title screen when you boot this game up, which looks fantastic by the way.
Look at the size of that fucker!
Peter explained the last time he spoke to Uncle Ben, they argued. And sadly, after the wrestling match, Peter is cheated out of his money by the wrestling promoter, which leads the promoter to be robbed by a criminal later on, which Peter just lets walk straight by him.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
This, of course, comes back to bite him later on, as Uncle Ben is gunned down that very same evening. In a quest of pure vengeance, Peter decides to go after the killer himself, going around the city to find members of the Skull Gang, which the killer belongs to. After interrogating one of the members, he finds out where he is, at an abandoned warehouse. I always find Spider-Man being really angry quite terrifying. Take away his jokey nature, man, he is a force to be reckoned with.
At some point, I stopped pulling my punches. I got rageful.
I got bitter.
Arriving at the warehouse and going through most of the Skull's gang, he finds Uncle Ben's killer. After a brutal beatdown, Peter is horrified to find out that the man that murdered Uncle Ben is the same robber he let go earlier in the evening. But before Peter can get his revenge, Uncle Ben's killer slips out of a window, falling to his death. Afterwards, we cut to Spidey on top of a building, remembering his uncle's words that with great power comes great responsibility. Yeah, we get it already.
No! Anyway.
Peter fully embraces his new role as Spider-Man, vowing to use his powers for the good and safety of the people of New York. He also gets a job at the Daily Bugle as a photographer, taking pictures of himself.
Easy money!
And he gets a huge amount of support from his aunt and his friends Mary Jane Watson and Harry Osborn, as well as Harry's dad, Norman Osborn, Oscorp's CEO.
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz. You know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Speaking of Norman, himself and his scientists are investigating Spider-Man, as they believe Spidey is the key to developing their human performance enhancer, or a super soldier serum. So, Captain America before Captain America. Okay then. Failing to produce proper results will lose them the contract to their rival company and bankrupt Oscorp entirely.
You know, let's not take the piss here.
I certainly wasn't.
Well, I think you are.
So, Osborn sends some robots out to capture Spidey. And how do you think that went? Well, the robots are all destroyed and Spidey defeats them all. Later, while on patrol, Spider-Man witnesses Shocker and the Vulture robbing a jewelry store and escaping with a lot of prized items.
Thanks for the money, dummy.
Deciding to go after Shocker first, he pursues him through the subway station and the sewers. Bloody hell, Shocker, you don't have to blow up every single wall or floor in your sight, mate.
Yes, I do.
After a long chase, Spidey beats up everyone's favourite cushion costume villain, and Shocker, in an absolute stupid move, decides to grass up Vulture's location to the webhead. What a teacher's pet.
If I can't have you, no one can.
Spidey goes to Vulture's location, which is an old clock tower. I was fully expecting at this point Nemesis to shoot the thing down with a rocket launcher. Climbing up the tower, Vulture escapes with Spidey hot on his tail, or feathers in this case. Spidey defeats Vulture on top of a massive building and leads him for the police to pick up. One thing I love about this level is how Spidey just keeps using old man jokes at Vulture the entire time. I mean, come on Spidey, respect your elders.
You can't go around taking things that don't belong to you. What kind of example does it set for impressionable youngsters out there?
I've fallen, and I can't get up.
Not giving up on his hunt, Osborn tries a new approach.
I've got a plan so cunning you could put a tail on it and call it a weasel.
They find a new superhuman to capture, which just so happens to be Scorpion. This version is quite different from the usual. Instead of being a regular guy that works at the Daily Bugle given a suit and powers funded by JJ himself to fight Spider-Man, Scorpy this time is a government experiment, on the run from them and quoting conspiracy theories every 5 minutes, like a modern day Redditor.
What is that? What the fuck is that?
Being the purple pinstripe, Spidey decides to investigate the robots that have been hunting him, which allows Scorpion to escape, and we never see him again.
Get over here!
Meanwhile, Osborn has been fired due to failing to complete the super soldier serum successfully. I'm sure this won't cause Norman to do something rash or stupid in order to get result.
Yeah, about that.
Norman decides in a desperate bid to test the serum on himself.
I have a bad feeling about this.
And in classic Spider-Man comic book fashion, it goes horribly wrong, leading to the creation of his alternative persona, the Green Goblin. With a new glider, armor and helmet, and in an act of vengeance against the board who fired him, he attacks them at an Oscorp Unity Day festival.
Vengeance is mine, saith the me.
In the chaos, Mary Jane and Harry are caught up in the madness, leading to Pierce suiting up to take on the Goblin.
Round one, fight!
Spider-Man fights the Goblin, stopping him from harming more bystanders and causing more destruction. After the fight though, Goblin offers Spidey a chance to join him in his madness crusade, but of course Spidey says no.
No thanks, bro.
The Goblin then reveals he's planted bombs across the city and escapes while Spidey manages to find and disarm them all.
A bomb? Something this size could take out a whole city block.
In the Xbox version only, Osborn decides to hire Kraven the Hunter to capture Spider-Man. Luring Spidey to a zoo with a flaming spider logo, Kraven poisons Spidey and forces him to complete an obstacle course, filled with all sorts of different traps while hunting him down.
Gonna get you.
Hey,
Spidey defeats Kraven and leaves him for the police, attaining an antidote for the poison in the process.
Well, well, well. If it isn't the consequences of my action.
After a second round with Green Goblin escaping his goblin razors,
Hate those things.
Peter obtains ones and studies it, and finds that Oscorp has been manufacturing them, leading his investigation to the Oscorp building itself. Making his way through security as he goes to the secret labs, he finds out they're making both chemical weapons, and in their backyard they have a giant fucking robot. No, I'm serious. Oscorp has a fucking sentinel. And Spidey manages to neutralize both. Question time. Why would Osborn need the serum when they have a robot the size of a bloody building in his backyard? Norman, no wonder your company's buggered, mate, if this is what you're spending your money on.
I'm a fire in my laser!
Spidey manages to arrive in Osborn's office where he learns Goblin is going to go after Mary Jane. After finding a photo of the two on his desk, Spidey escapes Oscorp and chases down Goblin to the Queensberry Bridge.
Don't worry, Mary Jane. I'm coming.
Where he rescues Mary Jane and faces the Green Gob for the final time.
Round 3. Fight!
He defeats the Goblin, leading to him unmasking himself as Norman Osborn.
Shocking.
In one last attempt to kill Spider-Man, he sends his glider to impale him, but in classic Spider-Man fashion, Norman gets impaled instead. Nice little homage to the original comic and the movie. Although unlike the movie, he doesn't get impaled as bald, so that's something going for Norman.
It's a wound that will never heal.
Spidey attempts to reveal his identity to Mary Jane, but before he can do so, she kisses him, and Spidey ends the game with a nice little fourth wall break, telling the player to go outside and play.
Yeah, that's my life. Complicated. Looks like you're done now. Go outside and play.
Two things. I love how they are just kissing while Norman's just lying dead in the background behind them.
I'm not dead.
Yeah, he says he's not dead.
Yes, he is. I'm not.
And two, why is Mary Jane kissing his mask? I know this is the PlayStation 2, so you couldn't do that in real time, but like, just... it just looks so weird. And that about wraps up the story for Spider-Man 2002 Story. So how is the story? Overall, pretty decent. Not too bad. They did a really solid job of adapting the film's plot into this game, while adding some of their own points, villains, and making it a solid adaptation of the film. I much prefer the villain selection we have here from Enter Electro. Green Goblin, of course, he's the main villain, so he's going to be here. Shocker returning from Enter Electro. Vulture making his debut. Same with Kraven. And Scorpion returning from Spidey 2000. I will say most of the villains don't really have a real presence in the story. Scorpion just appears, and while I really enjoy his character and how different it is from the usual version of him, he's gone before it starts to get really interesting. I will say they do a really good job of showing the struggle Spider-Man has with Green Goblin in particular. The other villains are not that difficult for him to take down, but Green Goblin is really the first big opponent he has to take on, making him the real ultimate threat for Spidey to tackle. I did watch the first film before playing this for comparison in terms of the plot, and I gotta say it's a solid adaptation really. Not perfect, but decent. There's no cheesy dialogue, although I would have loved to have seen Green Goblin saying to Aunt May to finish her prayer in PS2 graphics. That would have been fucking hilarious.
Finish it!
It's amazing they adapted it this well to begin with, as they were developing the game the same time the film was actually being made, which meant the game designers would not have been able to watch the entire film until it was finished. That must have been a really stressful situation for Treyarch to be in, but sometimes under pressure you perform the best, and for the most part, this is the case here. The story has a solid pace, a good chunk of missions that play well into the overall story. I had a decent time with the story mode, and I would say if you enjoyed the film, give it a go. More of what you already love is rarely a bad thing, which leads me on directly to the gameplay and level design.
Okay, let's go.
Gameplay wise, how does this game stack up? I would say pretty good. Spidey 2002 has a lot of similarities to the previous two games. You have your basic punch and kick controls, like the last game with square and circle, the web attacks with triangle in different directions.
Same, but different.
Crawling on the wall is the same as is the web swing, although the web sling in this game is a bit odd. Instead of swinging in a straight line, you web sling up as you move forwards. This can make swinging a little bit difficult in the open-ended areas. It's not bad, but when you swing around the city and especially in chase missions, it can be a bit tricky to keep it in a straight line.
Oh, bollocks.
Which ties into the height meter. The red part is where Spidey is, and the blue part is where your next objective is. I gotta say the swinging feels a bit of a downgrade compared to the last two games. Thankfully it gets better in the next game, massively to new heights. One thing that is a massive improvement is the camera. It still has its fair share of issues, but with an option to reset the camera in the center with L2, it makes it a lot more easier to use. The camera lock is not bad either. You can lock onto targets with L1 and switch enemies using the right analog stick. You also have a much better web zip line with R1 and a much better camera look around feature using R3 or just clicking the right analog stick. But what is new though, you may ask? Well, a few more things.
What's new?
The most obvious one is more combos to use in combat. As you go along the game, you find red Spider-Man emblems for health, blue for webs like the previous games, but you can also find these gold spider emblems for new combat moves.
I feel stronger now.
There is a decent selection of moves, and you can check them out anytime at the start menu to refresh your memory. I get a huge Mortal Kombat vibe off of some of these combos.
It's official. You suck.
The main issue though, some of them are not that effective and trying to remember all of them can be a real task. I will say though, the most effective one and the only one you need to remember is Circle X Circle, aka the tackle move. This move wrecks everyone in the game and is so useful in the boss fights, so remember that one well. While swinging, you can also use aerial attacks and web shot to airball enemies. These were somewhat in the last game, but here it's much better, and the web shots do some really big damage on the aerial enemies. You can also hang from the ceiling with R1 and triangle, great for stealth levels and getting a good look around your environment. Gameplay wise, decent as a whole. A nice new selection of combo moves, some sound improvement control wise, and a couple things that are a little bit of a downgrade, but decent overall. Level selection wise, if you've ever played the PlayStation 1 games, there are a lot of familiar ground here. You have some chase levels, some bomb disarming missions, and some boss fights. To be fair, a lot of Spidey games do follow this style too. Like the last two, it's level to level rather than free roaming. Not just yet, but we're almost there. So no touching the ground in the city, or you'll fall to your death. We have some city levels, sewer levels, lab levels. I can totally see why some people see this game as a spiritual successor to the last game. A secret Spider-Man 3, you could say. I really like the stealth levels though. Spider-Man games have always had a problem with making stealth gameplay work. Even the most recent games have this problem to an extent. I would say though, the effort here is not that bad. On the top left, you have a Spider-Man face logo, which shows your visibility. When it's darkened, you are hidden. And when it's the classic Spidey mask, you are visible.
Are you sure about that?
It can make some really tense situations, especially when you're trying to hide from those damn annoying robots. There are some annoying levels though I found in my playthrough. Whilst I do like the first stealth level at Oscorp, the second one can fuck right off. It's a massive difficulty hike, and trying to stay undetected is a flipping nightmare. Another one is before you fight Shocker, you have to do this part where you must use the columns to block Shocker's blast attacks. Sounds simple enough, right? The problem is trying to reach the columns by the end gets way too difficult as the attacks get faster and faster each time. A pain in the ass, but not anything terrible really. The worst level though is the robot level. Christ, where do I start? I'll walk you through this entire level, right, and see how you think about this. You have to disable 10 shield generators blocking you from attacking the main area on the robot's weak part. Sounds simple enough, right? There's just one teensy wincy tiny little problem. Everything and anything is firing at you. I'm serious. Everything in this goddamn level is firing at you, trying to take you down. The first bit's not too bad on the robot's back, but once you get some distance, the robot fires its death laser, and the thing will nuke your help in mere seconds. My advice, use the web impact blast attacks. This will give you a good distance to take out the generators safely.
What would happen if, for some reason, we ignore somebody unlocked 100% of the cerebral capacity?
Still, it's nowhere near as the plane level in Enter Electro. I still have nightmares about that level.
Get away from me!
There are some pretty good levels here, but I will say of all the Spider-Man games I have played for this channel so far, this has been the most difficult one to beat. There are some bad levels in the previous games, don't get me wrong, but there's a big difficulty hike halfway through the game. If you can get past that, there is some decent fun to have here. But with all these different levels, how are the boss fights?
Nice. I'm so glad you asked.
Spidey 2002, as I've already stated, has a nice variation of villains, so let's dive into it. I was dreading Shocker's fight, as I remember how much I hated his boss fight in Enter Electro. Thankfully for me, this is a massive improvement. Unlike the last game where you have to pull barrels down to damage Shocker, here you just have to dodge his sonic blast and wait for a chance to strike. So much better. Vulture's one is entirely airborne, where you must damage him with your web attacks and diving kicks to ground him, requiring him to take a break like the sweet elderly citizen he is. And then Spidey, classy as he is, punches him when he's down. Scorpion is a little bit more complex, as he jumps around the train station a lot. You'll need to pull him down with your webs and give him a good old thrash him. Side note, this is one of my favourite Scorpion costumes I've ever seen. I can't decide whether I like this or the fight in Spider-Man 2000 more, but let me know what you guys think is better. Kraven, on the other hand, poisons Spidey very early on, so you'd think this would give him a slight edge against him. Kraven is an absolute chump in this game. He is not difficult at all, and quite easy to track down around the zoo itself. Go back to Russia, mate. Oh, and sorry about that Kraven movie. Nobody deserves that fate. Poor lad.
A fate worse than death!
Finally, we have the Green Goblin, the main boss of the entire game. You fight Green Goblin twice. They're not particularly difficult fights when you're in the air to get him off his glider. However, on the ground, it's a bit more difficult. Goblin has these two really annoying attacks, where he gives you a massive hug draining your health, or the one where he just slams you on your flipping head. Both do massive amounts of damage.
Give me a hug.
My best advice is to use the tackle on him and pretty much every other boss, and get some good long distant attacks on him, and combine that with the impact webs and you'll be grand. The boss fights are really good, a huge step up from Enter Electro's ones. So far the best boss fights in Spider-Man gaming. There are some cool extra modes here too. Like the last few games, there are some cool cheat codes. Big Head mode, which turns Spidey's head into a giant potato.
I found a potato.
Alex Ross's Spider-Man costume, which also changes Green Goblin's one too. Playing as Thugs, Shocker, sadly just a costume skin, not with his actual powers. In the Xbox version, you also play as MJ, a first-person view, which I'm not gonna lie makes the game borderline unplayable. Nice idea, but wrong generation of gaming to put this into.
What the fuck is going on?
Sadly, in the cheat code area, there's no Spidey popping out of nowhere punching the codes if you input swear words. How dare you get rid of that? One of the coolest ones is you can actually play as the Green Goblin. And this is not just a skin. He has his whole moveset and everything. All the bells and whistles. You have to finish the game on either hero or superhero difficulty though. But you can replay the entire game as Green Goblin with his glider, his full moveset, pumpkin bombs, and speed boots. He's also voiced by Josh Keane, future Spider-Man voice actor. The story overall is that Harry's trying to understand what happened to his dad, so he uses his dad's goblin gear to find answers. Along the way, he even fights a third Green Goblin. There are so many goddamn Green Goblins.
Oh my god, so many goblins!
What a great cheat code. And you know full well, if this game was set in 2023, this would be a full paid DLC for £20 or more. A different fun mode that I didn't even realize was in this game, Spidey Pinhead Bowling. I repeat, Spider-Man Bowling. In order for this to work, you have to web sling into the bowling pins, and at the last minute, press the kick button to hit the pins. This is the most random but funny extra mode I have ever seen put into a video game. It really makes me appreciate all of this, because it makes you feel like the developers had a lot of fun making this game, and it truly does show in the final product.
Impressive. Your parents must be very proud.
You also have a training mode, where you learn the game's basic or refresh your memory on certain things. There's also some challenges too. But you want to know the best part of this training mode? Bruce fucking Campbell voices the narrator. He does this for all 3 games in the tutorials. And best of all, he insults you the entire time.
Welcome to the tutorial. Yeah, I know, you want to get on with things, beat up the bad guys, do the whole superhero thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, everyone's got to start somewhere. Trust me, when you're hip deep in trouble later on, you'll be glad you went through this. All right, now let's get started. Now get the gum out of your ears and listen good. Touch the question mark directly in front of you.
I want this man in every single video game, please.
Give me what I want! Give me what I want!
Spidey 2002 is an early PlayStation 2 game. That being said, I think it looks quite good for that standard. Going from PlayStation 1 to PlayStation 2, there's obviously a massive jump in quality and graphical areas. The character models look decent, very accurate to the films, costumes and attires, but the levels being like the PlayStation 1 areas, you can notice the graphical improvement between the two, certainly. Nothing is reused at all, and the effort is really good. The pre-rendered cutscenes don't look too bad either. The PlayStation 2 always has the problem of some horrifying looking characters in these, abilities. Thankfully not here, except JJ. Yikes, he has looked a lot better. I really like the soundtrack though. It's way more memorable and greater on the ears compared to Enter Electro's kind of bland one. The Goblin song in particular is a banger of a song. Voice acting wise, how are we looking? For the most part, the performances are pretty solid. Vulture is voiced by Dwight Schultz, a brilliant choice and fits the character perfectly. Although I do hear Dr. Animo from Ben 10 a lot here, but this was first, so it's way cooler. What's cool is he actually reprises the role for Marvel's Spider-Man. That is so awesome. Shocker is voiced by Michael Beatley, a massive improvement from Enter Electro's EastEnders sounding one. Kraven the Hunter is voiced by Peter Lorre, a great intimidating Kraven, sounds experienced waiting for a real challenge at the same time. Scorpion is voiced by Mike McCall and gives one of the most unique versions of Scorpion I've ever heard, in the best way possible. However, there are two major ones here. Green Goblin and Norman Osborn is voiced by Willem Dafoe, reprising his role from the film. This man is the definition of the Green Goblin, and honestly, I can't imagine anyone else in this role. No wonder they brought him back for No Way Home. He should do more voice acting roles because he is excellent at this. I love his exchange with MJ just before he kidnaps her. It's so hilarious.
Tough day at the office, huh? Mine is a killer. Put your heart into those streams, my lovely girl, the better the bake.
The only grey area of the voice acting, and this one hurts to say, is Peter Parker and Spider-Man, voiced by Tobey Maguire. I'm really sorry guys, he sounds so bored here. I love Tobey's Spider-Man, but man, he does not sound interested in the slightest here. I don't know whether it's his dialogue, because there are some really bad Spidey jokes here, or it's his delivery.
So you must be Quilt Man, Padded Pete, Mr. Triple Ply? Oh, I've got it. The cushion.
I heard a rumor that Josh Keaton was originally going to voice Spider-Man, but Tobey was brought in at the last minute. I mean, it is what it is. I'm curious to see now how his performance is in the other two games. One day. So, in summary, Spidey 2002, the game, is a fun time overall. It's underrated in the Spidey PS2 back catalogue, a massive step up in most ways for the Spider-Man games, and it only gets better from here with the next few. Talking about this game makes me really happy I grew up in this time of gaming. For me personally, this is not the best Spider-Man game, but it is kind of underrated, and it is a decent fun time overall. Good gameplay, solid story, much better boss fights, and mostly good performances. If you like the film, I'd recommend giving this a go, but be prepared, it is a tough game at points. So far then, the PlayStation 2 Spider-Man games are off to a good start. Now to end, let's check in on Tobey at the airport these days.